Hello, everybody. This is Heretical Weekends, episode number 8. This is Fox in the Know, titled, Do You Expect Us to Believe That? For those of you joining us via the inner tubes, we have Fox in the Know, and what should I call you, just Turtle or Turtle 2080?
Turtle's fine.
Turtle? I figured. Okay. Turtle 2080. And, you know, I'm kind of proud, in a way, to let everybody know that we at least reunited the Super Atheist Brothers. If we could just get the other one in here. Noticeably, Gabagai is missing, and A Theological Potato is missing, but I think Gabby is coming in a little bit. And who knows where Potato's at. He drives around a lot.
Yeah.
So...
Busy.
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
Finish things.
So Fox, I believe, was it us that had a conversation at the end of the show last week? A couple of things were brought up that sort of brought this topic into being. Do you want to recap that for us?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I suppose I've had this in my mind for a while to do something related to the disparity between the formal arguments that theists give, which they're obviously more than entitled to give, that they claim should convince atheists of the existence of God, and the personal reasons why they actually do believe the things they do about God, which are often not the formal reasons. I mean, the formal reasons might support the personal reasons, but often I think we could dispense a lot of the vitriol and the argumentative nature of this debate if we just understood that actually the reasons why people believe may not be some objectively convincing to atheists, but were personally very convincing to theists, and that isn't anything to be embarrassed about. That's perfectly fine. People are entitled to their beliefs, and I think we would probably create a lot more of a friendly atmosphere if we could admit that we have a different perspective and that we have different reasons of different emotional investments has brought us to the point where we are at, because we will get the most unconvincing and ridiculous arguments given to us, and some of them are pretty good but still fail to convince, and theists will just look at us and think, what's wrong with you guys, why won't you just admit? And they will then deduce that we are lying to ourselves, that we won't accept rational sound arguments, when really it's the problem is that these arguments are often built by people who seek to further convince themselves, or if they're already convinced, to support their position, so that they seem to have some kind of rational, objective fig leaf to cover their, personal beliefs. Which I think the problem is, yeah, it's very hard to argue authoritatively for something which you believe personally. But if you say that this is objective, the way objective reality is, and these are the arguments that show it, then you can go around with a pretty big stick beating up on people who think differently. But vice versa, I think atheists could probably learn a lesson to say, well, a lot of the reasons why people believe the things they do is because they've already believed them before they reached a certain age where they could rationally reject them. And what we should do is we should be able to have that dialogue and encourage people to actually think things through for themselves. And it might be that in some cases people can be reached and shown that the emotional reasons for why they believe the things they do, or the cultural reasons, are not enough to support, the objective conclusions that God or the supernatural, whatever it is, actually exists. So I think I just find it interesting that we are expected to believe these arguments, which don't convince the very people who are formulating them. They already believed for different reasons. So why can't we talk about that?
Yeah,
Because it's laughable.
I think it's an interesting because it seems to me that all the formal arguments all were derived from people who were specifically trying to arrive at a specific point. You know, they're trying to argue for God. None of those arguments came from a neutral perspective that arrived at God. And I think that's, to me, it's just very obvious when you look at that.
Yeah, when I
Yeah.
spoke to Andy Jack briefly in the comment section of our little promo commercial thing, you know, after I mean, to me, he sort of missed the point, at least in the first couple of comments, but once I drilled down deep enough, you know, he admitted at least that he went to church as a kid, even though he didn't quite understand the message. And then later on, but he said he went to church, but he didn't identify as a Christian, which didn't make any sense to me. I guess maybe because he was too young to know. He said he didn't quite understand the message, but then he received a revelation later on, and now he's a believer. And when you have an impressionable young mind in this situation, going to a church, it's not beyond the stretch of the imagination that, you know, he receives a quote-unquote revelation when he gets older. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, it fits into the theology he was already raised to believe.
Yeah, who'd have thunk it?
Right, exactly. How ironic, you know?
Yeah, I think, what always bothers me is atheists expend a lot of energy trying to show that the formal arguments, which if you just get them, at first impressions don't really convince us. They seem to be kind of pushing themselves towards a favoured conclusion.
At
which
best,
isn't maybe. Sorry,
at best, it seems like they're there to confuse.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, and again, we then look at the people who are actually feeding us these arguments and thinking, so did you not believe and then read the Kalam and now do believe? Or were you sat at home thinking, you know, there isn't a God, and then you read about the modal ontological argument and were convinced and that's it, now you're a firm believer? Or even things like, you know, you looked at the complexity of DNA, which is probably something which maybe is more likely to possibly convince people, I don't know. Or you just thought evolution couldn't possibly be true, so then I'm going to start believing in God. You know, the universe. I think fine tuning is probably, in its crudest form, maybe is something that might convince someone who didn't previously believe. But I just think the more formal philosophical arguments, which are pushed as being the best of that theism has to offer. I mean, presuppositionalism, for God's sake. No one was sat at home thinking, "Oh my God, I'm really worried that I don't know anything, because I don't know anything absolutely. Therefore, I have to believe in something that could give me absolute knowledge. Oh, now I'm a Christian." You know, no one really does that.
Yeah.
And yet, this is what's being pushed. This is what's being pushed. Well, all the while, there are actually honest reasons why people believe in God. And from the perspective of theists that I know in my life, who do believe sincerely and are able to think rationally and for themselves, they will just say, well, you know, to be honest, I just, it gives me comfort, or you know, I like being part of the community, or I want to think there's something more in life, or, you know, those kind of things. And those are the things where I would say, well, you know what, I respect that. I am not going to belittle you for that. I'm not going to sideline you. I think we can have an open dialogue there, and we can work together in society, and you know, we can still. People who I love greatly think like this, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. But if they then come to me and go, well, no, it is absolutely true, and you should believe it because everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause, and that cause is God. I mean, if someone says that to me, then I'm going to call them on that because I don't find that convincing. I mean, it might be in a back and forth discussion that actually they can articulate that very well. Someone like Matt Bell at least tries to do that, but Matt Bell doesn't believe because of the Kalam. He already believed, and if he didn't constantly demean atheists for not having that same personal experience. I mean, this is the thing, you can't. I mean, if I find something beautiful, like, you know, a painting, a work of art, amazing, that's my subjective opinion of that piece of art, and you just think it's crap, I can't then turn to you and go, no, no, how dare you? It absolutely is. It's objectively wonderful and beautiful, and you must think it's beautiful as well. I would put that down to subjective differences. I would say, why can't we do the same with theism? But it's the theists that continuously tell us, no, no, no. We are the ones who have to. We have to have the same visceral sense of this is just true and correct that they have.
Yeah.
But you can't objectively replicate those kind of feelings and sentiments in a person. You can't force someone to believe something. You can make a good case for why they should. You could, and again, the things that would make an appeal would be how it's beneficial to you as a person, how it gives you sense of meaning and purpose, and drop the derogatory. Well, without this you can't be moral, or without this you can't be rational. Stop doing all that. Make a positive case for why you think we should believe. Say there's a sense of community from it, or it gives you solace. Whatever it is, it just makes you feel happy. It makes you feel good. Just say that to people. Say, give it a try. Why not? Think about it. Some people are always going to find that convincing. Many of us won't, and we shouldn't be ostracized or made to feel like there's something wrong with us because we don't fall for those kind of ploys. That's just not the way we're wired, I guess.
Yeah, but Fox, you touched on so many points that I can't even remember all the ones that I wanted to comment on.
I can't remember either, so
well,
don't worry about it.
Touching upon your earlier point, when I first ran across Sci 10, other than wanting to like strangle him or shake him at least violently, the first thing that popped into my head was, "There's no way this guy, went in believing this shit. There's no way this guy was convinced with this. It's almost ridiculous. It's like a clown show, and so." Right?
One of the things that I like about Sci 10, though, is that you're absolutely correct, is he actually admits that all of the formal arguments that people give are not convincing. He said, I think I've seen videos where he says, I used to believe the Kalam. I used to look at it and think it was a very good argument, but now I look at it and think, actually, there's all these problems with it. And he even admits that, that theists lose the literalist debate when it comes to science. Science isn't going to help them. So all those people like Nephilim Free out there thinking that they can beat all the PhDs and they're all onto a loser, those guys. The only hope he honestly thinks to keep this literalist interpretation is to jump completely into presuppositionalist apologetics.
But then
so he even concedes that they fail. So that's the irony.
Yeah, but he says the apologetic is designed to shut mouths. So how's it convincing anybody if the whole purpose of it is to end conversations? You know what I mean?
I think that's just completely there to confuse people because at best that's what it does. Nobody walks away from listening to a pre-sup argument and thinks, yeah, that makes sense. At best they walk away thinking wait, what is going on here? That's what I thought the first time I heard a pre-sup. It's confusing, but I didn't think, oh, there's a God.
Right. Yeah. I didn't walk away or going away going, geez, man, I don't know if I'm in the right reality or not. I can't. It never occurred to me. I walked away from the first time going what the fuck? Kind of just looking at him. Half of it was confusion, and half of it was disdain for his attitude.
Yeah.
But I think that argument is built in bad faith. I don't think it's. I think Turtle. Sorry, I'm going to call you Turtle. Turtle is correct. I think it is meant to just confuse. It is just a smokescreen. It's a fig leaf. They want it all. They want to be able to go around and say this is literal truth and that you should believe it, and they want to be able to say that with some objective clout, but they know that science isn't ever going to give them that objective clout, so they have to have some way of just getting around the burden of proof by just blowing all that up and saying, well, this is why you have to believe it, and if you say anything else other than that, then you're irrational, and so you have to assume my worldview. So that's the example of. I mean, when we pose the original question of do you expect me to believe that, I think some theists may honestly think that by offering out these objective arguments they can reach us and they can make us believe. But some of them, I think, in the case of presuppositionalists, it is just done in bad faith, and I think they know that it's not going to convince anybody, and I don't even think they even try. I think it is there just to give some appearance of parity in the debate, or even superiority by taking such an extreme position. You know, they took the time to kind of pounce really on YouTube. Is when they saw that they were losing the scientific debate, they realised that a lot of the leading proponents of atheism were people who were scientifically minded more than perhaps philosophically so. So they then ran into philosophy and stole a few problems that affect them as much as anyone else, if not more so, the irony is. But they thought they'd take them and then they'd I mean, I'm not saying that Van Til and all that, these arguments go back further in the past, but the way that modern presuppositionalism works is it's designed to be a shock tactic, whereas I think Van Tilian apologetics and all that was a little bit more of an esoteric debate within theology, I think, rather than something that was ever going to be, street preachers like Satan tries to think he is, going around telling people about why the epistemology is all a load of rubbish. So I think this mutated version of presuppositionalism as a YouTube phenomenon is just the attempt to run away from the scientific arguments into philosophy, where a lot of the scientifically minded atheists were maybe not, at least at first, all that familiar with how to beat it. So it's dying on its arse now, but that's because people have wised up to how vacuous it is. Right. But all the while, this whole presuppositionalist fad hasn't been an attempt to get more people into church. It's just been a bad faith enterprise of just throwing up a smokescreen to people.
Well, it's funny.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It's funny because when I was in high school, one of my neighbors who I was friends with, I guess, was a believer or something, and I, really hadn't considered anything. I just I wasn't religious. And he gave me this. Hearing the precept now, what he told me was an oversimplified version of it, in the sense that he said, God is responsible for all existence, and I'm like, okay, and he goes, well, my evidence of this is you exist, right? And you're like, well, yeah. And then he kind of like smiled, checkmate. Checkmate, atheist. And I mean, I think that given our knowledge of science and physics and cosmology at the time, was very limited. Us being in like the ninth grade, I mean, so on some level, we were like, oh well, shoot, But I assume as we got older, we learned, about cosmology and stuff, and how things came into being and planets and stuff. I've never heard that again. Now it's kind of clever in a way when you think about it to take that same sort of logical sodomy and apply it toward just thought and reasoning in general. It's like we take that same concept and formulate it to you like thinking, and then you're thinking, haha, it's like, you can't argue against me now, it's stupid. Not to quote Matt Slick, but it's stupid.
Oh God, there's a great example of a disingenuous arsehole, basically. I mean, he's made a living out of doing this, and I think honest, genuine theists might try their hand with these things. They might try and say, well, okay, I understand you don't have the same personal reasons that I have for believing, but maybe I'll try out these objective ones on you. It might stick, or it might start to at least shape your mind so that you will get the personal revelation at some point down the road. But someone like Matt Slick, he's only there to, I think in his mind, show other theists that actually don't you dare go over to atheism, because if you do, then this is the consequence of it. You have to give up on foundations for morality and logic and all this. It's a kind of bullying tactic, and I think it's more aimed at theists than it probably is at atheists, because we all just think he's just a dickhead.
I think so too. I think his attitude. I think personally, when I see him speaking, You know, a lot of Christians or a lot of theists have a persecution complex, at least in my opinion. And I think they see him as sort of like the guy to stand up to, you know, the secular, you know, agenda. You know what I mean? And he even brought that up in the sort of in the Wolf. Have you guys see the Wolf King hit Matt Slick interaction?
Yeah. You got an upside down cross.
Yeah.
Like,
Excuse me, Mr. Upside Down Cross. You know, and I mean, it just like, what, 20 minutes of insults to Wolf King essentially.
Laughable, yeah. It was.
And I tried to get into Wolf King's. He had like a quick hangout, and I really wanted to talk to him about it because it didn't look like anybody showed up, and it would give me a chance to, you know, be on a hangout for once. But Matt Slick is a guy I think that for theists that or Christians that maybe that aren't as well versed in talking to atheists or, you know, or whatever the case may be, lack of confidence, lack of whatever. He's sort of like their hero in a way where he's like, you know, I can put the atheists in their place. I'm educated. I'm smart. You know, ask me questions.
Yeah, I mean, he's that whole thing with Matt Dillahunty where, you know, I think the second time that Matt Dillahunty spoke to him when he was on the Bible Thinking Wingnut show, he just generally, yeah, he was a lot better than maybe the first time he rang in because, you know, when you're talking to someone who is like Matt Slick and who is determined to speak bullshit at you and flap around all over the place, it's very difficult to pin him down. But once you know his tactics, I think you are then going to be a lot better at just being dismissive to him. I think that's the thing. You have to approach people like Matt Slick with confidence and just show, well, yeah, but you don't know X either, and then he'll go, oh well, if I, you know, and then he'll try and bring false equivocations in all over the shop. But his whole tag argument is just the worst, one of the worst arguments as far as I'm aware. I mean, there might be some very clever retort to how he is getting. I mean, logic. How is logical necessity contingent on anything and still necessary? That would seem to be a contradiction. So it would seem that for him, logic has to be contradictory, which completely destroys the point of the argument, right? If logic is necessary, then it's necessary. It's by definition not contingent. Like, it doesn't need a god for anything.
You overlook
contingent condition, and the god itself is contingent. So the contingent god becomes logically necessary because it engenders logical necessity, which is actually not necessary but contingent. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he gets out of
like
that.
It was made to confuse people.
Yeah, it was. I think it was.
Is that good?
Well, I think it was. I think it's just it's wrapping up smart words and making them look like they're actually doing something. It's a little bit, and again, it's a slightly more sophisticated Trey Jadlow argument, isn't it?
I was just gonna say that. That was my point, dude.
So I have to get my Trey reference in. You know, I have to get a Jadlow reference in there. You've not done the soundboard anyway, so I'm already disappointed.
I know. I'm so. Do you know what? I worked a couple 12-hour days last week, and I was just kind of like, by the time I got home, I just couldn't
That's
take
no excuse.
Jadlow's face. You understand? I gotta like watch like a video and like, you know, sound bites. I gotta face and like see, and then I gotta see the same thing he says over and over again. I was like, piece everything together. I just didn't have the.
You would go mad. You would, yeah.
I would have.
I'll let you off on that. That's fair. It is a difficult task, but I think if you did make a Trey Jadlow soundboard, it would make more sense than Trey. So, Trey could actually just like set up a computer program that would just spout the Jadlowisms, and
I'd have to.
Gave him the job. He could get back to making teeth.
I don't. I don't even know where all his videos are, so I'd have to search for his conversations. I'm just like, you know what's funny though? My first conversation with him, I still have on my channel, but he has no beard, and it just freaks me out. Like, you can see the timeline just by the growth of his beard. Are you familiar with Trey Turtle?
Yeah, I've never talked with him, but yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Oh, look at you. But yeah, he does the Matt Slick thing where when you're not buying into a shit right away and you have questions, and pretty reasonable objections, they go to condescension immediately. It's like, well, you don't know, or you don't know enough to debate me on this, or I think he said Fox. He said, "Fuck, you have an undergraduate philosophy, right?"
Yeah.
Okay, and he's like, you have the tools, but you don't know how to apply them, or what do you say? Something along those lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was quite derogatory of. He said, "I don't blame you personally. I blame the institution that has given you these tools, but you have no idea of how to actually use them to form a." I mean, Trey's big thing is unity out of diversity. He thinks that's the foundational question of philosophy. That's the core of philosophy. I've tried to explain to him that I don't think it is, but because Trey thinks really gimmicky. Everything is oversimplified and reduced down to these very basic, malformed ideas that he's cribbed from R.C. Sproul. So that's what Trey does, and yeah. So he has in his mind, he'll freely admit that he's uneducated, but he will say to all of the people who are, a lot of them are more educated than he is, that they're wrong. So I mean, I'm not to appeal to my own authority or anything, because as I've said to Trey, I said, if your argument's good, your argument's good. But generally speaking, people who have studied, the subject, or are a bit more aware of fallacies and coming to false or premature conclusions, generally the reason that's why they don't create the kind of argument you do. And also, I've tried a million and one different ways of showing him, beyond the level of philosophy that he knows, how there might be problems. But Trey again has a very limited amount of philosophical knowledge. What he's basically taken from someone who's not a philosopher.
He's
and he'll admit that's all he's got.
I believe he's our official unintentional mascot of the show. Like he is a parody of everything that I know about.
I mean, it's a shame that he's never available on Sundays, because, and he wouldn't come in anyway. But Trey's always he's good to talk to, in the sense that he's so bad at it that it does make you feel a bit like, well, actually, you sharpen yourself a little bit. Maybe he's a dull tool that you would scrape a knife against to get it a little bit sharper. That's not very nice way to put it.
The problem I have with Trey, and no, that's right. The problem I have with Trey is that he never really gets. I never really get what point he's trying to make. Like he does.
Yeah.
The meta narrative thing, for example, right? So that came about due to some minimum wage article or something, and then he creates a room called Meta Narrative Anyone, and then Fox and him talk about 20 minutes about what you were talking about. What is it? Diversity and occurrence and whatever, blah blah blah. And I'm like,
yeah, I saw some of that video.
And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking? What does it have to do with minimum wage? What the fuck does it have to do with God? What are you talking about? Like, what's your point? I just want to go like, okay, meta narrative. Just point, instead of arguing, this beginning part. Just say say the whole thing. Say the whole argument, and then let's unpack it. Because I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
He never does it.
This is like.
But again, I still don't know if Trey's for the minimum wage or not. I don't know.
Yeah, making is a skilled profession.
Yeah, that whole discussion was really ridiculous, because my basic retort to Trey's position was, meta narratives disappearing and vanishing, and because of that, these things are likely to become more common, and the world's in a much worse shape because we don't have this meta narrative overarching. And before I even got to grips with what he exactly meant by that and what the meta-narrative was, I said, well, Trey, no, that's not true, is it? Because by pretty much any metric you care to mention, other than just begging a question on, how many people believe in God or whatever, as a percentage of the population, the world is a better place. And, there are terrible things that go on in the world. No doubt, they probably always will. They always have done. But we are, at this point in time, in a better place. And maybe that is in some sense caused by the lack of a meta-narrative. It might not be. It might just be that it might just be a correlation rather than a causation. But so that should have killed it dead. Really, he should have stopped his posturing on that. But of course he couldn't. He just had to keep on pressing it because in his head he has to bulldoze his way to the conclusion that he thinks is this brilliant thing, and he gets incredibly frustrated with people who stop him at each step and ask him, why does that follow? That doesn't seem to obviously follow. And he goes, yes, it does. Oh my God, you guys are just so silly and stupid, and you don't know what you're talking about. And again, it's just begging the question because it's like, well, I think this has to be the case. So anything that goes against what lets me get to that to where I want to go, my conclusion is wrong, and that's Trey in a nutshell. He will never. I've never really seen him accept any errors or any kind of flaws in his position, which is remarkable because he has had pretty much the same set of discussions, the same 3 or 4 discussions that he has about 15 times, as far as I can see, maybe even more in private. I don't know, but to just say in your head, and I guess to get back to the original topic, well, they're all just atheists, so they would say that. I'm pretty sure that's what Trey tells himself every time he comes up across an objection to his argument, not realizing, of course, that it's probably the other way around, that the reason why he can't accept it is because he actually already believes for different reasons to the argument he's giving. So, if you ask Trey, why do you believe in God, he'd no doubt say, oh, well, it's simple. Contingency by itself cannot be. There has to be a aseity, or whatever bullshit formulation comes from Trey. It will be the same old tired set of arguments that he always gives. But that's not the reason why Trey believes. And he's a perfect example of why we get nowhere, because we're having a debate about something which none of us find convincing objectively from a neutral position. Neither of us came to the point where we went, oh yes, this argument works now, I believe. That just never happened. So he needs to, and theists in general who insist on pushing this line of thought, needs to understand that maybe, just maybe, the reason why atheists are not getting it isn't because they want to keep sinning and that they can't accept the truth. Maybe it's because this argument, which they themselves don't believe for objective reasons, isn't particularly objectively convincing, right? Because they've already lost they already believe something, so they've already lost any sense of objectivity. They already, of course, they're going to seek out arguments which fit and support their view of how the world is and what exists in the world. I mean, they could make an argument for saying, well, you have the same biases and towards atheism, but actually, in some cases that may be true. But I think, generally speaking, and for myself, that's not the case. I await to be convinced by these objective arguments. These are the things that are going to get me to it, unless I have a Damascene conversion tomorrow and start praising Jesus. I mean, that could happen. I'm not going to rule that out. But if that does happen, it isn't going to be because of the objective arguments. So what I want is a good objective set of arguments that are sound and convincing and compelling to me. And what I get doesn't really fit for me. So I think a lot of this debate is kind of pointless.
Really is.
I think, to me, what it is for a lot of these Christians who, maybe beforehand didn't really even think about any of these things. I think, for instance, I mentioned to you guys beforehand, but there's this woman at my work who has decided she's going to try and convert me, and she clearly has never.
That's so awesome, by the way. I would love for someone to try to convert me.
And I'm a very passive atheist. Like, I don't get into arguments with people. I will, go on to YouTube and watch some videos or whatever, and post a comment every once in a while. But I don't get into debates. But what strikes me is how poorly positioned someone is to try and convince somebody else when they're already familiar with all of your your views, basically. Like how unconvincing telling me, her conversion story was. I think now she feels like she has to go out and figure out something else to bring to the table, and I think that's where a lot of these formal arguments come from, is because when you are trying to convince somebody about your worldview and you realize how silly it sounds and how easy it is to come up with an alternate explanation as to why now your life is better, you have to turn to something that sounds like a formal argument that might convince somebody else.
Yeah, it's funny when I talk to people, outside in real life. I do have a real life, but I'm kind of pretty passive about it too, because most of the people aren't the wacky nut jobs we see here on YouTube. Generally speaking, I hear a lot of I have a personal relationship with God, or whatever they want to say, and I can't convince you, but I'm convinced, and blah blah blah. And it's hard for me. My immediate reaction generally is to crush them, but there's a part of me that says, not crush them in a mean way, but when they say something stupid, like it's hard to go, no, you know what I mean? Like, and kind of get into it. I just kind of go, oh, okay, we'll just kind of give them a thumbs up and move on. When they tell you, like my life is shit, and my dog got ran over by a car, this blah blah blah, and then they think they had some sort of spiritual revelation or something. I don't want to get into it with them, because then I'm like, the thing that made their life better, I don't want to take that away. I just kind of go, oh, cool, good for you, man. And just.
Yeah, in the case of this woman at my work, she had she didn't get into much of the specifics, but she was saying how bad her life was, and she was saying how she was on the verge of suicide at one point, and was saying how this turned her life around. And my response to that was, well, I see it as these people helped you, and you made some decisions that helped put yourself in a better position to live a happy life. And I don't think I ever specifically said it wasn't God, but I pointed out how she was relying on people to improve her life and to make better decisions for herself, and that kind of a thing. So yeah, I'm the same way. It's kind of like I wasn't trying to deconvert her or anything, but at the same time, I kind of didn't want to just let her off the hook and be like, oh yeah, God did all those things either.
Right. It's kind of like that old adage, I think I said it last week, but it's like I had a headache, and I took some aspirin and I prayed, and then my headache went away. And it's like they don't realize that they're actually doing things, that are improving their lives. It's not like they sat in the room in the dark and then suddenly the ray of light came in and changed everything. She actively took steps.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people have to attribute things to the supernatural. Like they can't, it's the whole. I don't know if you guys are into the whole. You get into that human nature thing with being, we're problem solvers, induction, or whatever, blah blah blah. But we fill in the blanks when we don't know what the explanation is, and for some people they don't see that explanation, with their own determination and hard work and good decisions. They don't see it, and they apply like a supernatural causation to it for whatever reason. But more importantly, we have a furry beaver in the room that has not been introduced yet.
It's a rabbit.
It's a rabbit?
I thought it was a Gavagai.
Beavers don't have tails. Or wait.
Yep.
Beavers do have tails.
Yes.
Reverse that. Beavers have tails. My guy doesn't.
Okay. Because I was about to run with prehistoric furry beaver for like weeks, but
no.
Gavagai made it into the room, and we're all glad he's here. Gabby
so
did.
Sorry.
No, none of us understand the time difference. Apparently, Fox, me, nobody gets what's going on. I was out getting coffee when Fox messaged me for the for the show, and I'm like, crap. So Turtle was regaling us with the story of his the lady that's trying to convert him.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that?
I heard a little bit about it. Yeah.
There wasn't too much to it, but did you want to talk about your meeting you went to?
Oh, this is going to be
Yeah. Well. So there's a guy that I used to go to church with here when I was a believer, and he and I have had some back and forth on Facebook since that time. We left the church. It was a Baptist church, and as I kind of went through my deconversion process, before I kind of became fully a disbeliever, I kind of slid down this path towards away from more conservative, theological and politically conservative churches, and and then kind of sought out churches that were more liberal theologically and things. So we left that church that this guy went to, but we've kept in contact, and we're still friends on Facebook and whatnot. Well, he invited me to this Bible study, and I was like, well, what's the topic going to be? And he said faith, and I said, the kind of the Price is Right, you're a winner thing went off in my head, and I said, I love to have a Bible study about faith, because I think it's a really bad way of trying to decide what's true and what's not true. So I didn't tell him that, but so I went, and Tuesday night was the first thing, the first kind of installment of this Bible study. And I didn't know, really anything more than it was going to be me, him, and he said he'd invited a couple other people. And when I walked in there was another guy who had also gone to church with that I knew, and and I wasn't sure exactly, if that guy knew that I was an atheist yet. So it was a little weird at first, and I very shortly into the kind of discussion and things, I said, well, in full disclosure, I'm no longer a believer, so I don't know if you knew this, and and to that other guy, and he said, oh yeah, I was aware, and so, but anyways, the conversation went on, and it was pretty interesting. A lot of the initial discussion was looking at Bible verses, and I kept saying, well, I really don't buy that the Bible is the word of a God. I think that people wrote it. So you're not going to be able to persuade me if that's your aim here. And the other guy, we'll call him Keith. So Keith, the guy that was kind of the host, it was at his house and stuff. He was like, well, we have this here. This is really for you. So because you'd been interested in discussing some of these things, so take it in whatever direction you want. And so I basically went about saying how I lost my faith and why. And there were two younger guys in this group. Really, I think neither one of them had really been fully exposed to arguments from an atheist perspective before, and the one guy in particular, I think, was kind of taken aback by it. He didn't say a word through the whole thing and listened very intently. So I'm interested to see how the next few go, but in general, the whole thing kind of went, well, God says this, and I kept kind of going back to it and saying, well, why do you think that a God actually said that? Because what you have is a book that was written by people, and you think that these people heard from a God, but I don't know, and so that's just kind of the general direction that it's been going in, is this back and forth about.
How many people were there?
Total 5 of us all together. So the host, Keith, this other guy from the church, I'll call him Ron, and then two other guys that I had not met before, younger guys.
Wouldn't it be great if in like 3 weeks, guy comes back and he goes, I kind of believe in God again. This Bible study thing really works, guys.
It is the Word of God.
He's like, why don't you come over, Turtle? Well,
I'll explain it all to you.
What's funny is, I like to take when I'm on these hangouts, I'm much more relaxed than when I am actually talking to people in real life. In actual real life, I sound, when I'm discussing God and stuff, I sound more like Gabagai or Fox. I'm very much more astute. Like these things are fun for me. And I have a friend who does a Bible study and who was a believer and then not a believer and then a believer again. And he never quite tells me why he started believing again. He just looks at me and he goes, man, I saw some shit, man. Like, I saw, and I'm like, what does that even, what did you see? But he won't tell me. But he won't tell me because he knows, because he readily admits, he goes, you know what? He goes, you're smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. And I'm like, and he goes, he jokingly said, we have a Bible study. And, he goes, I should bring you with me. And I'm like, I totally go to a Bible study. And then he goes, no, man, because you would destroy us, man. And I'm like, well, then why'd you invite me? I had no intent to take me. Like, I would totally go. Like, why wouldn't I? That'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting though, because when people do give examples which are not, we have to be careful, because if I started off by saying, well, wouldn't it be nice if people just told us the real reasons why they believe? If they do tell them to us and we think they're a bit silly or a bit stupid, or obviously if they're just, we need to get across that to us. It just doesn't occur to us that the character in the book is real. We just don't automatically believe that. So it's useful in that sense, but we can't then go, oh my God, you guys believe that? You just think that? That I think has to be done quite carefully. I think I don't tend to respect the content of people's beliefs, but I try to respect people. So if they are worthy of respect, or show that they are just going about believing the things they believe, and if I think they're a bit kooky or a bit silly or whatever, that's just the way it is. I try not to be a dick to those people. But I do think it's still interesting to have that discussion, to have them actually say out loud that, well, the reason why I believe is because I've seen some shit, or the reason why I believe is because it says so there in the book, and then you can then go back and say, oh well, actually, I just don't believe that the book is real. I think it's a storybook. Or I find a slightly less offensive way of saying that, I guess. I think there is something to be said for that kind of dialogue. As much as we all like the going in for the numpties on here and destroying their bad positions, their arguments, ripping them apart, doing all that. It's fun and games and everything. But day to day, when you're just chatting with theists who are actually honest enough to say to you, well, I believe because of these reasons, and I know that they're probably not going to convince you, and that's okay. That to me is a win. And I know there are people in my life who I care a lot about who think like that. And that's good. We can get on there. There aren't people in my world like some of these people on YouTube who just think that they're absolutely right, convince themselves for whatever personal reasons they had, and are now throwing out all these terrible arguments that they then expect me to believe. That's where I think they've crossed the line. That's where I think we start to defend ourselves and our lack of belief.
Yeah, well, and there were a couple of things that happened that kind of fall into that whole. I don't know. They're not even arguments. They're just kind of quips. I think that Christians throw out a lot of times, almost in defense. But so like one of them was, you actually know that God is real, based on some scriptures. And you're just denying that truth in unrighteousness. That to me is just what do you even say to that? Because it's just such a low. Yeah. Basically you're lying.
Well,
my book says you're lying, so you have to be lying.
I mean, the
Yeah,
issue is that they have to, everybody basically sees the same things in life, but they all have to try and explain, what they're seeing. So when they see an atheist, the Christian has a way of explaining it is well, they are lying, or they have to explain it in some way. Why do you not at least claim to hold the same views that I have? And so they have this excuse of you're basically lying, or perhaps the devil is involved in some way. But I mean, I think the thing that I come away with when Christians, I mean, the thing they'll say is they have this belief because of X, Y, and Z, but the underlying honest truth is they believe simply because they were told to believe it. I mean, 99% of the Christians out there grew up in a Christian home or in a Christian society, and they were told that there's a God, that Jesus died for their sins, and all these things when they were children. And even the ones that maybe didn't become Christians when they were children are still familiar with all these stories, and it's ingrained in the society, like my coworker. And so when they get into rough times, they're told, well, this is a way to get out of that situation. But it's still just this thing that is ingrained on these kids when they're young. I mean, the two main points in a person's life that I'm aware of that they become a Christian are as children or when they're in the middle of something horrible going on in their life, like two completely vulnerable situations.
I agree. Most of the people that I've talked to that are believers, either they were raised to believe that way, at least initially, and they possibly, like lost their way. I don't know, like, but did a bunch of like slutty stuff or whatever, or bad things, and then at the end of it all, they go, oh, by the way, I found God again, and now, or they were just generally okay people, not too extreme either way, and then like their life took a dump, and then they're like, ah, crap, my life sucks now, and then they don't know what to do, so they kind of just look up in the sky and, God, if you're real, and you mean it's permeated in the media, especially here in the U.S. I don't remember. I don't know if you guys remember the show Cheaters. I don't know if you guys saw that in Europe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen it.
In the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Okay. You ever seen the show Cheaters, Fox?
No, I think I can probably guess what it's about. Is it like where people are discovered to be cheating on their loved ones?
Yeah, like
it may have been on some obscure network TV, but it wasn't on the BBC. So
yeah, they basically hire someone hires a private investigator to go follow their significant other and catch them cheating, and then while they're out cheating on a date, they run there with cameras and bust them red-handed. So anyway, that's a tangent, but in the beginning of that show, there's a montage of like drama, and at the last clip, one of the guys says, "You need to be right with God," and like kind of walks away. And that's like when the title screen comes out or whatever. But in every aspect of like especially in American TV, like or at least where I've grown up, the culture is like when you get to be right with you need to be right with God, or you know what I mean. You need to be more Christ-like is kind of the bar that a lot of people set for what's good. So for us here in the U.S., at least where I grew up, that's pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, I think not in where I'm from in England. I mean, we don't really tend to have that sense of the cultural norm is as if the best person you could be would be a Christian, but that's just not doesn't tend to be the way it is, and I guess it's probably the same in most of Europe as well. I'm guessing in Finland too.
Lucky.
Yeah, I know. Someone told me one time, gosh, it was one of my friends. We were out, we were having beers or something, so maybe that has something to do with it. But he said something like that, like you know, something along the lines of, you know, my friends were more Christ-like, or they became believers against, they became better people, or they became more Christian, or something like that. And I said, sweet, that means they ran around with swords and they killed and raped people, or like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Hey, Gabby, in that Bible study, did you happen to bring up your concubine story?
No, I didn't mention that one. I have to save some of my good stuff for later. There's going to be four installments of this Bible study.
He goes,
yeah, they'd kick you out if you start open with that one.
If you go again, let me direct you to this link.
No, I mentioned slavery and things and whatever. I was going to say one of the other things that they kind of quipped or threw out is, well, is there anything that you believe, like, as if I believed in nothing, because I don't believe that there's an invisible deity who created things and wrote the Bible and whatever. But like the other guy, Ron, was saying, well, what is there a book that you hold to, and just the idea that you have to, there's got to be something that I don't question, or that I take whole cloth and accept as true, without it just doesn't.
Well, there is Gabba Guy.
What's that?
It's the God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. Obviously, that's your Bible.
That or the Origin of the Species,
What kind
right?
of an atheist are you? Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be Dawkins. It's going to be Dawkins.
Okay.
Darwin obviously converted on his deathbed, so he's not. He's fallen ill favour with the atheist. It's that maybe Hitchens, sort of New Testament, Old Testament kind of thing.
I've ran across some people that are like that. Not so much in real life, but on YouTube, where if you don't adhere, like, wholeheartedly without question to some doctrine or some book, then you have no beliefs, which I find really weird.
Yeah, it's strange.
Hey, Potato.
Yeah, a good way to counter that might be to say Potato's muted. Is he there?
Hello.
I just wanted to make sure he was there because he's been quiet for so long.
Oh, sorry
Just
about that.
thinking.
No worries. You've been following along. Is there anything you want to contribute since you've heard so much?
I just came in. I haven't listened to you guys.
I think you should at least read your last comment that you put in the side chat there.
Yeah, they definitely don't like Dawkins. I love Dawkins as an educator. I'm not the biggest fan of his as a debater.
No.
That's not his strength.
No.
Definitely not.
Or as a general human being, I find him impossibly kind of condescending and just a brood, a kind of the word. I mean, as an English person, he's like that kind of condescending Oxford Don type. Yeah, he's probably a Tory as well. Throw that into the mix. But I would generally, I think he's a good lightning rod against he's someone to beat up on for theists, and he seems quite happy for that to happen. So, but I think going back to the if you need a book thing, one of the things you could counter that with is if you could say, well, if there's a break between the book doesn't have to be real or doesn't have to be verified, and you can just adopt any old book. So you can then pick whatever book you want. Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Dawkins, whatever it is. I mean,
Green Eggs and Ham.
That's but then they would obviously retort and say, oh no, because this book is true. But then you say, well, I don't think it is. That's the problem we have here.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that's exactly the line that they gave me. Is we know that we can trust the Bible because it's true. That's not question making.
Did you actually say that?
I may have, yes.
Hey, maybe do you think one of those guys would like to come in next time?
I don't know. I've mentioned to Keith previously the possibility of doing a hangout, and even showed him my channel, and I think I directed him to one of the conversations that I had with Preachin' Sean.
How'd that go?
I mean, that was a while ago, but it was okay. And you know, he interviewed me on his channel, and I interviewed him on my channel, which was kind of fun. And I've been meaning to. He posted some comments in my slavery video that I did. You know, just talking specifically about Old Testament laws and how the apologists kind of whitewashing of the practice in ancient Israel is so much baloney when you actually look at the text and what it says. You know, the practice was horrible, and and you know, they try and make it out to be just like servanthood, basically, with a 7-year contract. But it's not the case. So, but anyways, and Preach and Sean commented on that video, and you know, offered to you know, do a hangout with me discussing slavery, and we just haven't gotten around to it. He messaged me, but I don't know, for some reason he's got trouble messaging people through Google Plus that I've not run into with anyone else. So I don't understand exactly how that is for him. But he messaged me through my my email address, which I don't check that account very often because everything that I do is either on Google Plus directly or nothing, basically. That's pretty much all I do. So I would like to do a hangout with him though sometime.
Did any of the guys in your Bible group, did they following the show topic? I mean, were they already believers going in, or did they have any arguments they levied against you? You know what I mean? Were convincing initially to them, and that's how they became believers.
Yeah, well, we didn't really get around to that so much, but I know that I believe that almost all of them have pretty much grown up in the church. I know that Keith and Ron have told me about times where they've kind of either fallen away from God in Keith's case, and then and he went through this period where he was in his words not living for Christ, and then has come around. And I mean, he's one of the people I can at least say really does his best to try and live out the life that you might expect to see from a Christian. I mean, he dedicates huge amounts of time to working with drug rehab people, and invites homeless people to live in his home and help them to get a leg up while he's proselytizing to them and evangelizing to them and things. But he's hardcore for sure. The other guy, Ron, is much more kind of cerebral about things, and he said, I think he's an engineer by trade, and kind of said he went through a period of time where he really did investigation into the Bible, and I think if it was up to him, the Bible study would focus on kind of the integrity and veracity of the Bible, because that's kind of the direction that he kind of keeps wanting to pull in. And I'm less of a scholar about those things. I don't know as much as certainly Bible scholars, but I've learned and looked into it enough to say it's a mess, and I think that it's not very credible, but we'll see where that goes. But he considers himself a skeptic, and that he
What?
he's convinced that through his studies that he has learned that the Bible is trustworthy and dependable.
It always amazes me when somebody comes on, and I don't know if, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I believe I heard Matt Slick say this at one point, but where they give you the whole trope, I love science, I'm skeptical, I'm a real, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a real intellectual type.
You want it to be a marine biologist? That Slick says that. I want it to be a marine biologist. I know a few things about science, and then it's always the blah blah blah. But science, I don't have enough faith to believe in science, or science is just another form of faith. Blah blah blah. And then it's always my skepticism brought me to theism. That's the dishonesty of someone like Matt Slick. Skepticism didn't bring you to theism. I'm pretty sure pretty much no one can say that, because if you were skepticism, you might be skeptical. You can be skeptical of science. You can be skeptical of evolution. You can be skeptical of pretty much everything. But you have to also be skeptical of God and this. How can you be a literalist about the Bible and claim to be skeptical at the same time? Those two things don't go together at all. So it's just disingenuous. It's this attempting to co-opt skepticism for his position of, we're actually the ones that are more rational and more logical and more skeptical. No, you're not. That's just drop that. Just drop that, and we can get on that, Slick. We can be friends. We can be buddies. We can try to build a better world. But if you insist on this dishonest, disingenuous position and say that you have everything in your bag because God basically makes sure everything's in there, well, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I would say to Matt Slick, I don't know if it was Fox I told this to, or maybe it was Gabba Guy, but for guys like Matt Slick, and I use Nephilim as an example, I believe, but Nephilim free, no one likes talking to that guy really anymore, but the only thing I find interesting about him is his hookers. And that's the only reason I would have, if he was wanted to come on, my first question would be, fuck this God thing, tell us about your hookers. That's all I care about now. In Matt Slick's case, it would be, the Q&A, and if ever I went on, which I probably never will, my first question would be, was it in God's plan that you had a fucked up relationship with your daughter? You know what I mean? Is that all part of God's plan, or, how does that all work, I don't care about what he has to say about the topic. His interest in me is only his daughter, for whatever reason. I don't know why. I've heard it all from him in every other aspect, so.
Yeah, it's interesting that Slick says that he's a skeptic, because the whole point of the tag argument is tag is famously anti-skeptical argument. The whole point is to establish that something is necessary, and so it's kind of weird. I don't know.
He's a weird
guy. He's a skeptic. He's a skeptic in the sense that often when you hear people who say they believe in God, not in God, in ghosts, for instance, they'll say, "Yeah, I used to be a skeptic, but then I saw that really blurred picture, and now I wholeheartedly believe in ghosts." Or I heard a bump. What else could it have been? People like to think they are more skeptical than they are, and I think we can all. It's probably true of all of us, even people who would like to consider themselves as skeptics. We all tend to want to run to conclusions that we prefer, and some theists would say, well, you would prefer there to be no God, so that's why you've actually run to atheism. If you were being truly skeptical,
that makes no sense.
You wouldn't be an atheist. It doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I think.
I guess. Sorry.
But they're going to try it out. They've got to try something, I guess.
Well, if I was being strictly honest, I think if it was Yahweh, I would probably prefer there be no Yahweh.
Yeah.
That guy's a dick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I made this point.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that was another one of those kind of quips that was thrown out there. If we could prove to you that the God, they don't say the God of the Bible or Yahweh. They said that God exists. But if we could prove to you that He exists, would you worship Him? I was like, no. I believe that Hitler exists, and I actually said this. I believe Hitler exists, but or existed anyhow. There's no way I would worship him either. Just because existence doesn't mean that you worship something.
I think it's very strange that if there was a God, that he would want to be worshipped. It just seems so pathetic to me. It seems like something a Bronze Age king would want. Really, the all-powerful, all-knowing being in the universe, he just wants these peons to worship him for all eternity? That sounds so pathetic to me.
I don't know if you guys have watched the Simpsons episode where Homer becomes a missionary.
Yes.
And he goes to an island and there's all these natives there, and one of the natives asks him basically that question. And Homer's response is that it's because God is powerful but also insecure, like Barbra Streisand. It is. It's a brilliant clip. That I just want someone should get that. It's just it just perfectly sums up that. Well, yeah, he's just an insecure guy. He's just got all this power, and he just wants to be loved. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But
I like he created everything in 6 days, and then on the 7th day he got tired.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work for an all-powerful, omnipotent being.
So we could have just created it all in one day, to be fair.
Well, that's
so really,
true.
he procrastinates. He's lazy, if anything. He's not efficient.
It's kind of the whole worship thing is kind of funny. It's almost like they took cues from other gods, of the time frame.
That can't possibly be true.
Calvinists would say that God doesn't need anything, but He still wants us to worship Him.
Yeah.
I mean, does that make any sense? I mean, He
makes
has
it worse in a way, doesn't
wants. Yeah, I mean, wants but not needs. I mean, what's the difference?
Well,
because that makes it all so contingent. He could have been otherwise, and he could have. So this whole fucking shit system of this universe, the way it runs, happens because it's the want of a god rather than the need of a god. It makes it even worse.
I love it.
Calvinism thing.
I love it when Fox curses. I don't know why. It sounds educated and at the same time vulgar, which is great, by the way.
Yeah.
I wish I had a cool accent. I really do.
See, I don't particularly like my accent, so I'd give it to you. I think, Americans just sound more positive. I would probably prefer it. I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Some Americans.
Yeah.
Some do. Yeah, I'd say I'd maybe draw the line at some of the southern oriented twang.
Where I live.
You don't want that deep South accent. You know what I mean?
Nah, don't want to say y'all to people.
Yeah. You'd be like, y'all, let's go watch some NASCAR. You don't want any of that action.
No.
So,
but on the
I'm sorry, I was going to touch on something real quick. My little interaction with Andy Jack, one of the things I hear a lot from theists as well, kind of a guy brought up, but he said, well, the Bible says I was going to be scoffed at and ridiculed like you're doing now, therefore the Bible's true, and
yeah,
I hate that because it's like, I just want to go, dude, you don't see that's, if I was writing a religious book, one of the top things I would put in, other than like I can't be wrong, because it's God. Is people aren't going to believe you.
And when it sounds like I'm wrong, it's just the devil.
Right, exactly. It doesn't take like a rocket scientist to figure this out. I mean, they were Bronze Age goat herders. I mean, and they figured this out. So
yeah, with the woman at my work, one of the objections that I brought up was just the concept of hell and how that didn't make any sense to me with a all-powerful, benevolent God. And she brought up something, just like she said, well, in the Bible it talks about how there's all these mysteries, kind of getting at that, we can't understand all these things. And just like you were saying, like I didn't say this at the time, but like if I was making a religion, that would be like one of the first things I would do is say, oh, there's all these, mysterious things, and we, humans just can't comprehend, why some of these contradictions aren't really contradictions. But
right, or why the things that seem evil aren't really evil. It's because we just have a blurred moral compass that doesn't quite work 100% of the time. Like any time that the God does something that seems really jacked up and immoral.
Yeah, by definition, every action that God does is good. Ergo.
Yeah.
Well, when he violates logic, it's just a case of analogical language being in play, and it's not really.
Analogical.
That's just.
What a douche.
Because a deity cannot communicate a deity to contingency. So there you go. That's why that thing that doesn't make sense makes sense.
Gabby, I don't know if you were in here earlier when I said this, but I'm pretty sure that Trey Jadlow is becoming like the unintentional mascot of this show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then I got told I really have to get on board. I really have to finish the soundboard, the Trey Jadlow soundboard.
Trey's the meta-narrative that ties everything together.
Someone
He's
in
our
a
meta-narrative.
hangout earlier this week, like Monday or Tuesday, actually asked me, like, what's the deal with you guys and Trey Jadlow? Yeah, I just said, I don't know. He seems to like watch our videos and comment on them and challenge us to hangouts and stuff. What are you gonna do?
He does?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fairness,
But
we
he
comment
won't come
on
in
it.
here.
No.
Like when he posts something, he'll create a video or like or comment or something, and then I'm scrolling through my Google Plus feed and I'll see Fox or Guy comment on it. I'm like, ooh, I gotta get in on this. Like I just immediately see you guys and I'm almost like, okay, what's been going on? Let me catch up.
Yeah, it's because it is just such nonsense, and it's just you always know like there's always going to be some gimmick that he's always going to try some new angle. Like his contingency argument, it runs into a wall, so he'll try the meta narrative thing, and then in a few weeks he'll probably on about the purpose thing and the intentionality thing again, and then it'll be back to contingency. So I mean, he did a hangout with Dave S, which is a pretty good hangout actually, where he was just like flawed by a modal argument that was quite complicated. So Trey didn't know how to combat it, and then they got into things like issues about the philosophy of time. And Trey actually admitted that his God worked on the B theory of time, but everything else worked on the A theory of time. When you could just say, oh, well, if things just worked on the B theory of time, then we wouldn't need the God. So he just gets himself wrapped up in these ridiculous like little things, and it's quite entertaining to watch, and it's all done with this air of condescension, this arrogance as well, and you just want to watch him, put a foot in it again and again and again, which is he keeps doing it, and yeah, I mean he does pop up every now and again and comments with something, and he's still this desperation to get people like Gary Edwards and Ozzy into a hangout with him, so he thinks then he's got the atheist pope of YouTube, so then he can then do the same verbal diarrhea as usual, and he doesn't seem to realise that actually we're taking pity on him, we're being charitable by giving him any airtime, because these are the guys who've got lives or have got careers or just have other people to hang out with who want debates and stuff like that. Dre's really far down on the list, so he should be a bit more grateful, Trey, if you're watching this.
Yeah, he is a guy that just screams for attention. But when I hear him, like you said, he went on to like the meta narrative thing, and I just want to ask him what I know what he means by meta narrative as a concept, but he never said what his actual meta narrative was. You know what I mean? Like, just get to the point, man. Like, if you just want to say God, just say God.
It's unity out of diversity. I think. I don't know.
God,
you get that?
But what does that do? Well, okay, if that's his whole point, and you go, okay, so then where does he go? I mean, how does he? I mean, I assume in some ways he's tying this to a God. I just want him to tie it to
the
God.
ultimate unity is God, isn't it? That's the thing. The ultimate unity of it all is God. So that's what he's trying to get at and failing terribly.
But he's going to fall into the same trap as he did with the contingency argument, because I don't know if he can ever get to make that leap from even if you can demonstrate a meta narrative, like how's that meta narrative God, his God in particular.
Yeah, exactly. But he will keep on trying.
Go on.
Sorry. No, go on. I was just going to say, he's just going to keep plugging away. He's just going to keep trying.
Oh, I was just saying that I don't know how he knows that his meta-narrative is true. I mean, you can invent any kind of story. I think you said that to him. I mean, anyone can invent any kind of story, how to account for things, and that's not the interesting question. That interesting question is that true?
Often with Trey, you don't really even get to those kind of practical questions. Those kind of that's a good question, and you won't even get to the point of asking that because he will be running into this like word salad stuff. So then you jump in the salad bowl after him and try to kind of wrangle some sense out of him, and you don't get that. So often the kind of practical questions of Why should I believe this? You know, this isn't convincing. All that stuff. That never you never even get round to doing that with a guy. Which is, I think, it shows again the disingenuous of adopting this kind of position. There are some theists who on YouTube who are quite confident in their beliefs and don't feel the need. They can have a rational debate. They can give rational, objective arguments for why their belief is sound. Why they think they can still be rational and believe in God. And that's an enterprise which I think has probably some mixed results in some respects. But you know, people like Maximus Confessors, he's a really good example of someone who actually does the work and can have the arguments but at the same time, he will probably admit that there are personal reasons why he does believe, and that's not something that's he's ashamed of, or anyone would actually say, how, you know, you come in here with all these, you know, pre-theoretical beliefs and that, or, well, you know, we're not going to do that. We can have a conversation, and he can go back at the end of the hangout and read a book or whatever, you know, and still find in those books some rational justification that works for him. And he won't push it on other people. He won't be like Matt Bell and come in there and say the Kalam and that he'll probably think that those arguments have merit and a worth, but also that they are flawed. He'll accept that they are flawed, and that he doesn't probably expect these to be arguments that atheists are going to find all that convincing. He probably thinks that they supplement theism, so they enhance, you know, theism. They take it to a different level, and that's something I can get on board with, because, you know, the Enlightenment happened pretty much because you had theistic-minded thinkers and philosophers who wanted to step away from like literal Dark Age beliefs and think, well, actually, if God does exist, you know, then God is rational. Then by being rational-minded, we are being more like God. We're reflecting the mind of God back when we produce these works. And people like, you know, you can see that in people like Descartes and in Spinoza, and you know, these are brilliant pieces of work. They may be flawed, but there's some move towards you know, actually doing something that is rational and interesting and has some kind of intellectual weight behind it, but not as sledgehammers to crack over the head of atheists and say, why don't you believe this? That's a modern twist. That's an insecure theism that I don't have much time for, because there are people who are secure in the theism and will then, on top of it, build some kind of rational discourse that we can engage with, and we can take it or leave it, and it works for them. We might say, actually, yeah, we can perform an internal critique and think, actually, no, that's flawed, or we can always point out objectively that might work for you, but for us, no, we're not buying that. You know, we just don't find that convincing, and that's fine. You know, we can have that dialogue, but yeah, it's the people like Trey and the people like Matt Bell who insist that these arguments that, again, I've said it 100 times, that they didn't believe going in, that these are solid diamond arguments that if you don't believe, then you're irrational and you're just a stupid atheist. You know, it's that's where we have a problem. That's where it's.
I think Matt Bell is just that old that he was there when the Bible was written. That's why he is so.
47 years old.
There's no way that guy is 47. There's no way. I'm 38, and you're telling me that guy's 9 years older than me. There's no way.
That could be you in 9 years.
Old.
That guy, like, dude, there's no way. There's no way.
He is 47 years old, but I don't know. Maybe he was in a, you know, he was. Some Jedi attacked him, and his electricity backfired on him and fried his face. And that's what he is.
This is what religion does to you, children.
That's not a belt. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, he does look a lot. He does look a lot older, but I think some of that also is maybe his webcam. Sometimes your webcam can make it look really old.
His webcam gives him 20 years. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. The webcam has 20 years. You know, and 20 pounds. I don't know.
I was considering making. What was that?
Sorry, maybe it's just had a hard life. I don't know.
I was considering making his karate picture my avatar for a while, but I thought that would just be good for me. Have you guys seen that? The one where he's like in his karate gi, like pose?
No.
Yeah.
I want to though.
Dude. He does like He does like on his page. He had like a couple of pictures of him in like South America at a karate tournament.
Really?
Yeah, and it's weird because like he's a small guy. He's a small. He has like he looks kind of like a lollipop. He has like a big head, but like a small frame. And he's in a gi, and it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I mean, good for him for doing stuff, but I'm just saying it's like maybe that's how you would think when you do karate. A large part of that is discipline, and you got to be calm, And then he gets on YouTube and like just berates people. I don't get it.
He's quite disciplined in his comments. He's quite methodical. He's quite disciplined. He puts in the work, I guess. You've got to give him credit for that. I mean, I don't think he gets very far with it, and he's obviously condescending arsehole. Matt Bell knows that I think he's a condescending arsehole. Matt Bell doesn't like me. He thinks I'm a pretentious whatever. That's fine. But we still have a maybe it's because I'm English and he's Scottish, and there's that we just doomed to never get on. But yeah, I mean, he's at least you know where you are with Matt Bell.
Yeah, dude. If there's one person that is a candidate for being mad at God, it should be Matt Bell for giving him that face. I mean, like he should be the angriest one,
Ouch, heathen.
Oh, that was
There's a part of me that does. There's a part of me that does believe I have a place on Talking Shit Tuesday for this exact reason, because I do. I mean, there isn't a lot of room to talk a lot of shit.
Hollywood. This Jesus Stevens after Hollywood. That's it now. Trey's going to be on you.
Oh, yeah. Hollywood heathen. That's awesome.
Had you guys heard Matt Bell was going to start a Patreon account?
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's true, but Defender of Theism, Matt Bell.
Yeah, I don't know.
The problem is, who's going to give him money? Because it's awful to everybody, whether you're a theist or not.
He should be paying us.
Yeah.
Oh, if he paid us, I totally would let him yell at me. Sure. Have at it. But we never quite established, because the conversation with him broke down so quickly. He has those 6 arguments, which are all arguments we've heard before for the existence of God, Kalam and all that. But he said it would take 2 hours, and I'm kind of confused. Is it supposed to be 2 hours of us listening to him go through every single one, or a total discussion?
Shoot me.
Because they have to go through all. What's that?
Matt Bell doesn't do discussion, really, does he?
No, but I mean, he had that in his thing where it would take a minimum of an hour and a half to go through those arguments, right? Now, do we have to sit there for an hour and a half and then at the end of it all go, yeah, I'm convinced now? Because those arguments...
Shut up, I'm talking. Shut up, I'm talking. That's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. Because you're a coward. You're such a coward. And what you don't do...
Oh, yeah.
That's just...
Did you say you were Scottish too, Fox?
I'm not Scottish, no. I'm not.
Oh, I thought you said you were Scottish first. Okay.
No, I'm English. So I'm from the north of England, and he's from Scotland. I think he's from Glasgow.
Yes.
Which is a great Scottish city. I actually really like Scottish people. I'm a big fan of the Scots. I was on their side in the referendum. I thought, you go for it, Scotland. There's a big thing now. There's a general election going on, where one of the parties is trying to big up the threat of the Scottish nationalists, that they're going to come down to the Westminster Parliament and just cause havoc and try and break up the Union and all that stuff, which is just nonsense. So yeah, I don't want any Scottish people watching to think that, I don't want to create any feuds between the English and the Scots. That's not my intention. Even you, Matt Bell.
Yes, the Matt Bell picture. Yes! That was so going to be my avatar.
Yeah, there you can see the intent in his eyes. It's just like, it's all there. I think he's imagining William Lane Craig when he's doing that.
Dude,
yeah.
No, because if he was imagining it, he'd have a boner.
Maybe he doesn't. It's just you can't see it.
I hope that's not me in 10 years, because that is just scary. That is scary. But I mean, are we all in agreement at least that for the experiences we've had with theists and Christians alike, or whatever, that there were pretty much already believers going in. I mean, I think we pretty much.
I mean, I think they're either believers or they're so familiar with the basic tenets of the belief that they might as well be. I mean, they're not like considering Hinduism or anything.
No, but I mean, like, they're already quote unquote Christians, and then they adopt apologetics to convince others.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't know if anyone has ever heard the Kalam and went, ah, shit, now I'm a Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if William Lane Craig converted anybody.
No, it's all defensive. It's all just defensive. Like ways to try and keep the faith, ways to try and fight off, doubts. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it just seems so stupid and a waste of time to go, like the Kalam, for example. I mean, why would you? What is the point of even going through all that rigmarole if that is not going to convince anybody necessarily? I guess I couldn't make the absolute statement, but I'm saying overall.
I think they might think that it'll convince people, but it's because they're looking through it through the lens of I already believe this. Isn't this convincing to me? This will probably convince other people as well.
Yeah, when you're already convinced of something, even if you're convinced by for other reasons or experiences or what have you, I think that you almost expect other people to be convinced by something that you perceive as pretty rock solid. I mean, like Matthew Bell, I think, holds the opinion that no one who is actually concerned with being rational would, not be persuaded by the Kalam, or at least William Lane Craig's version of the Kalam. And so his view is that, if he can direct people there, and provided that they are actually interested in being rational and consistent, that those things together will result in a conversion.
Yeah, it's
even if it's never happened before. this time it'll work.
I'm sitting there and I'm hearing these things for years and years, and maybe because I've heard them for so long, I'm immune to them. But even when I first heard them, I never went, let me consider this God thing. They've just never been convincing. I don't understand the expectation. I really don't.
So can I relay one last thing about the end of this Bible study?
Oh, sure.
This was the last thing that really happened, and actually I was the only one left. Everybody else had left, and I stuck around and talked with Keith just for a few minutes after everyone was gone. And as he was kind of walking me to the door, he was telling me about his experiences kind of with the supernatural realm or whatever, and how demons had grabbed his arm in one occasion and pulled him out of the bed. And then there was some place that he's going in another state to visit with someone whose home has demonic manifestations, and that their son was standing on the bed, holding a knife on their daughter's bed, ready to kill her or something, and how there had been in the same home years before some satanic rituals or something where some girl had been raped and abused by Satanists. And so this was kind of the last thing that was thrown at me at this Bible study, and I didn't say a whole lot in the moment because I was trying to process, like, what do you even say to that? Like, why would demons throw you out of bed?
Was he asleep at that point in time? Like,
yeah,
was he
I don't
there?
know. Well, and it's like Raw, Raw Apologetics, is that his name on here on G+?
Yeah.
he tells about how he had this experience where Jesus came to him and he actually saw him, and you ask him, well, what was your mental state at the time? And he's, well, I was high as a kite. Well, why would you believe that? You know.
Yeah, I love those stories where they're like, you know, I was drowning and I was without air and I saw heaven, you know. And it's like, well, you know, yeah, it's hard to, it's really difficult to. I've heard stories like that. Like I had a friend's husband, you know, said something to me like that where he was like, not so much like he was sleeping or he got pulled off of bed, but he was at a real vulnerable time in his life or whatever, and you know, he fell to his knees and prayed, and then like he felt like the Holy Spirit and stuff, and you sit there and, you know, my eyes are almost glazing over at the story at this point. I'm just like, oh no, you know, like, oh God, you know, and then but like, what do you say to that? You just go, okay, you know, and I mean, and then they leave these open-ended questions like, well, how do you explain that? You know, and I'm like,
right.
And what do you say? What do you go? You're insane. Like, what do you say? Like, you can't say, you know.
Or maybe you're embellishing a little bit.
Yeah, like that's not going to, you know, bring up forth any discussion. I mean, I kind of get into, you know, how brain states and, you know, emotions can affect things, and you know what I mean. That, and you can get into that kind of thing, but ultimately, at that point, in my experience, when people have something like that go on, the next response out of their mouth is, you cannot convince me otherwise. And so I just go, well, then there's no point in having a conversation, because that's not the point I was trying to get across. But, you know, if you're so stalwart you won't even discuss anything else, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and, you know, there's just so many directions you can go with these kinds of stories to try and persuade people to think about it a little more critically. I mean, like asking him, you know, why would a demon pull you out of bed? What's the point of that? And how do you know that it was a demon? You know, did he introduce himself to you and say, well, I'm a demon? You know, those guys that are written about in your sacred text? Those are us. You know, and you know, a Hindu person, no, not Hindu, a Muslim person might think that those are jinn, which I recently learned about in a conversation that I've been having with a Muslim guy on Facebook. These are like Islamic goblins that are basically, there's a third category. There's demons, angels, and jinn in Islam. and you know, how do you know it wasn't a prankster goblin that pulled you out of bed? You know, and you're just attributing it to this wrong thing. You know, and that's assuming that something actually grabbed you, that there was actually something there. And what was the point of any of it? You know, and this kid that is clearly having psychological issues that, you know, I hope that he is getting some counseling, and Keith indicated that he was, and that in counseling sessions that he had told people that he hears things from Charlie. Apparently the kid's demon's name is Charlie. I don't know. Like what? That. And
it's a good biblical name.
Yeah.
Beelzebub, Charlie, you know.
Patsy and Chachi, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, but it's there's so, and he's gonna go. Keith is going to this other state to pray with the girl that had been raped and things. I mean, I'm glad that somebody is reaching out to this person who was clearly hurt, but you don't know that her story is true. I mean, people say all kinds of things, and I've never, and I don't know any Satanists personally, but from what I gather, all of this kind of lore about what they do is bogus, and I don't know. I'm more skeptical about the girl's story. Not that she, you know, couldn't very well have been raped, but that this was part of a, you know, religious satanic ritual or something is somewhat dubious, in my opinion. I don't know.
People are very weird when I've heard on some YouTube these older debates where I think it may be like one of the British shows or whatever where they're talking like Q&A or one of those shows or whatever, and somebody made the point that it's like, well, how can you tell me about my own personal experience is wrong when it's my personal experience? And when I experience something that I can't explain, I almost figure I'm wrong at some point. You know what I mean? Like I don't jump to like, oh, by the way, there's an angel, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I totaled my car a couple years ago, right before Christmas, and I mean it was decimated, and I walked out with no injuries except for a little scratch on my knuckle. All my airbags went off. I didn't have any nagging injuries, no whiplash, no anything, and obviously the odds were against me. And then in that situation, have no injuries, right? Surviving, okay, but no injuries, that's something else, right? So the odds are against me, and I get it. But in my head, I'm like, wow, this car, the airbags really worked like they were supposed to. The crumple zones worked. This was great, And then I go into work, and the owner's wife says, wow, you must have had angels watching over you. And it's like, what? Like, I don't jump to angels immediately. I mean, in the expanse of the universe, rare things happen all the time, and so I don't get this whole idea that, to jump to the supernatural. And so when people attribute it to that and, any sort of experience they had, and you bring up, a question, even if you just go, well, okay, they just get into this defensive mode where it's like, well, you can't tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, but it wasn't angels, heathen. It was actually my ex-girlfriend's father's ghost.
Now that makes much more sense.
He's apparently good at rescuing people. When we were dating, she slid on ice while she was driving once, and he saved her from getting in an accident in that time. And then actually she's on my Facebook feed, and something similar happened again recently, and he was at it again. So I think it's safe to say that any car accident that's prevented is my ex-girlfriend's father's ghost.
Right. Never mind thanking the engineers that actually made this.
No, that would be silly.
My second thought in my head was, what a bunch of dickhead angels. They could have moved my car out the way. They could have, you know what I mean? Like, why would you let me hit the guy if you were protecting me? Assholes.
They wanted to scare some sense into you, but not really hurt you,
I was like, damn it, I gotta get a whole new car.
Well, and then all of the people who are actually injured, it could have been worse. Or if they died, it was to save the rest of the people who are left.
Oh, that's right, because the person that I hit was they ended up going to the hospital. They didn't have any permanent injuries or anything, but because they got hit, they went. So I guess the angels were like, they're all right. I mean,
good enough.
Yeah.
High fives, everyone.
Maybe the person I hit.
The other people.
Maybe the person I hit, his angels were like on a break or something. Like they didn't protect him. Like they were like, what happened? We're gone for 5 minutes and you're in a car accident. Yeah. It's amazing how people take these personal experiences and they close off any sort of rationale. It's the same reason why my friend I mentioned earlier says, I don't know if you're here, Gabby, for that, but he was like, I mentioned my friend, he was a believer for a while, and then he was a non-believer, and then he was a believer again. And then when I asked him, just what happened, what's going on, because we're good friends, and he just goes, he wouldn't tell me, he just goes, man, I just seen some shit, and I was kind of like, well, what does that mean? But he wouldn't tell me because he knows I would start asking questions, Did
he fall out of bed?
But no, I don't get it. Like, if you're that confident, that's fine. But people have these stalwart beliefs, and I don't see. To me, if I had something going on, I would want someone to spark some sort of like rationale into it. You know what I mean? Like I'm just that way. But for some people, they want to believe so badly that they just close off any sort of discussion about it. It's like, this happened, I believe it, and that's it.
Well, I think it is like it's like an excuse. Like it's when like you fall out of bed, you know, and you have this ready explanation of, oh, this was a demonic event, and it reinforces, you know, your belief. Then when in a situation where he's talking to you and telling you about this, you know, it you know, maybe at the time he just thought he fell out of bed and then kind of questioned it later, but now he's in a conversation with you and you're looking for evidence, and now suddenly this is what happened, you know.
Yeah, and it puts me in a position where I either call him a liar or I'm questioning his integrity or something,
Yeah.
and that's just a socially awkward thing to do.
Right.
So it's kind of like checkmate.
Well, I wouldn't even be, you know, in the nature of asking for evidence, it wouldn't even get that far. You know, asking like, how do you know it was a demon? It would be a good question. You know,
Yeah.
I was at okay. This is back in my had to been at least 12 years ago. I stayed the night at my best friend's house, and I slept in her son's bed, and because he was staying, she was a single mom, so we crashed at her house, and she would always, she wasn't really religious, but you know, she grew up really religious, and so we would joke about it all the time. And I slept in her son's bed, and I had this reoccurring, I had a nightmare that a face would form in the pillowcase next to my ear, and it was like, and it was whispering things to me like, watch out, we're watching you, this and that, blah 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 blah. And then, because it was her son's room, so there were like, you know, board games all over the floor, and when I turned to look at the board games, like I couldn't move, you know, and I was looking at the corner of my eye, and the board game, instead of like Chutes and Ladders, it said like something else, like blood and gore or something, like, you know, like that. And so it was, so I woke up slightly, and I was half asleep, you know, where you're not quite awake, you're not asleep, and I fell back to sleep, and the faces appeared again, and they go, you thought you could escape us, blah blah blah. And it was really weird, you know, it was really cool. And so I woke up the next morning, and I told her about it, and she's all, see, you have to go to church and pray and this and that. And I'm just kind of like, or I just had a funky dream, because we talk about this shit all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, nothing like that ever happened again, and I never think about it except when I have these sort of conversations with people. But I don't go for the rest of my life thinking, wow, I was really visited by demonic entities. I just go, oh, I had a dream.
Yeah, yeah. Because I remember when I was a kid, just the situation where in my bedroom, I was always afraid that there was demons in the closet, and so when my closet was partially opened, like I had this fear, like that I couldn't quite tell in the dark if it was opening or not or moving, and so I always remember having to keep it closed all the way, just so I knew for sure it wasn't moving.
That was partly Mom and Dad's fault for keeping demons in the closets.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you know, tuck them away. Mom was a neat freak, so.
The other guy would just go in there and like open up the door slightly just to piss you off.
No, I don't think I was that mean. Maybe.
I was scared of it. You know what? To be honest with you, I grew up. I mean, I think I'm a little. I don't know how old you are, Turtle, but I think I'm quite a bit older than you. I'm 38.
Not too much. I'm 34.
Okay. I grew up in the 80s, where every horror movie known to man, B movie or otherwise, was like devil, demon oriented. And we were big fans of, like, we watched there wasn't so much PG-13 stuff, it was all R-rated. And we watched every horror movie that ever was, B movie or otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so to have that crack in your closet as a kid meant something was looking at you. If everything I learned from scary movies was right, there was something in there looking at me that I couldn't see. Yeah. And so I would have the same sort of thing where I had to close the doors of my closet.
Yep. One of the thought I had when we were talking about people's personal experiences, and something that just recently I was thinking about, back when I was in high school, myself and a couple of our friends, we made a we had access to like editing equipment at school, video editing equipment. And so we made some sketch videos, and one of the sketches was a Scooby-Doo sketch, and we basically it was just where the one of us wore a mask and like was chasing around the others, like in one of those, and pick any episode of Scooby-Doo towards the end where they're all being chased by the monster. And but I was thinking about that sketch, and this was about 10, 15 years ago at this point, but I couldn't remember if I was the one wearing the mask or not. And when I was just thinking about this a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was interesting because I eventually remembered that I wasn't the one wearing the mask, but this was a personal experience that I had myself, and I've seen the footage of this because we made videos of it multiple times, but I still couldn't remember if I was the one wearing the mask or if I was one of the people being chased around. And I just thought that was kind of interesting how easy it is to confuse your own memories about the past. And this is something I have had access to seeing all kinds of times. But it's just when people assume that their personal experience is this ironclad thing and memory is so fallible, it's so malleable to other experiences. It's just but nobody thinks about that. Everyone just thinks that their memory is this ironclad perfect thing.
Well, and not only our experiences, but we're susceptible to being kind of our impressions of things are susceptible to being changed by even by our own beliefs and our shapes. Just for the fact that Keith automatically assumed that it was a demon that was the cause of him being tossed out of bed or something. Whereas someone in another culture, in Japan, where they have what are they called? Kami, like these spirits that are kind of in everything in nature and things. They might have assumed that it was a jokester Kami that threw them out of the bed, and
that's demon too.
What's that?
I mean, that means demon.
Well, I mean, but it's a different kind of thing. I mean, it's not like a fallen angel kind of thing. It's a different deal. So and pretty much every culture has these kinds of spirits that either play tricks or they're somehow devious or malevolent and that was the way that they explained how bad things happened. In some cultures it's witchcraft. Like I think in Pacific Islands, there are still cultures that attribute all kinds of things to witchcraft, from failed crops or illnesses and all these different things. It's because of a curse from a witch. A curse from a witch would be their explanation, most likely, for Keith being flung out of bed. So we interpret things based on the meta narrative, and that's why a meta narrative is really worth junk. You can stitch a community together, but there's no way to tell one meta narrative is right and another one is wrong, because anything that's kind of this underlying metaphysical magic story really it's not verifiable or falsifiable in any way.
You can fit the bill to any situation you want it to.
Yeah, exactly.
You're violating the law of non-contradiction when you say that. This is where that Trey soundboard would come in handy, by the way.
Are you actually making it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were here. Turtle was here for that, but when I was talking to Fox and Turtle about it, I had a couple of 12-hour work days, and to have to come home, because I have to have the clips, and then I got to piece, pull them out all the good ones,
Yeah.
get onto a thing, which means I have to listen to Trey for like a good hour or so, like
Oh my God,
after I'm
yeah.
home from right. So, I sit there and I'm all, I can't listen to this, man. I
Yeah,
can't.
terrible.
Like,
Couldn't pay me to do that.
right. It seems like it'll be worth it in the end, but I think to get there, I would have to slit my wrists. There's a risk of that. Having to hear that, By the way, Potato, you're not in America, so I don't know if you've ever seen this, but do you guys remember the the 1950s, the claymation, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so.
doesn't Trey Jadlow's beard look like Santa Claus from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Like, it's really big and stiff. It's just smooth. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even look like a real beard. Like,
Yeah, his is not white enough.
Oh, well, no, but I mean just in general shape and girth. Like,
Sure.
you look. I'm not even trying to make it funny. I really am not. Every time I see him, I see him as a claymation guy, like this beard. But anyway.
I have
And
a
I look-
recurring dream where there's Trey Jadlow's beard is on the pillow next to me, whispering things.
Nightmare.
Oh man, I wish I could do it like Sock Account does, like his animations or something. It just like instead of different sock faces, have Trey with no beard and the beard growing like gradually over time. So just keep
Time
looking.
lapse kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotta figure out how to do that. 'Cause that'd be awesome. I believe in this room, all roads lead back to Trey Jadlow because I don't know why he's so easy. He's so easy to goof on. I just don't. It's ridiculous.
He's the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end.
But as far as these supernatural stories go, I mean, are you Keith and Ron seem pretty convinced about what happened to them. Do they apply any skepticism at all?
Well, I mean, Ron, I think does, but I think he's kind of very carefully cherry picked the sources that he's gone to. I mean, he's like I've told him that I've heard from scholars on both sides about the kind of the integrity and veracity of the Bible, and he says, well, it's one thing to do your own research or whatever. Well, I don't have access to ancient Hebrew or Greek manuscripts or something. I can't do that. So and I don't, even if I had it in my hands, I wouldn't know what to make of it. Like, well, that's pretty neat. It's a bunch of chicken scratch on a little tiny card-sized piece of paper. It looks real old. So I have to depend on experts, and from what I've gathered, the majority, the consensus view is that there are some serious problems with kind of the transcription of the text from one scribe to another, adding, changing, deleting, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally, and then even authorship. There are all kinds of questions there, and these are not the fringe views. These are the majority views, and then you have certain scholars who are within this kind of fundamentalist group who are going to do everything in their power to whitewash all of the problems and insist that it's kind of inerrant and that there are no problems. So, but I think he exclusively focuses on the sources that will lead him toward those conclusions and kind of writes off everything else as biased or whatever. I don't know.
Like, what do you mean you don't know Aramaic? Your point is invalid.
Yeah.
And then if you rely on the experts, you're just appealing to authority.
Yeah.
Isn't there? Chris Mowdy said something in one of his last, not his last one, but it was a little bit ago. And I can't remember what he called it, but somebody made that comment, and they said you're appealing to authority. He said no, it was like not a meritocracy, but it was something along those lines where when I looked it up, it said it is a stance that acknowledges a group of people or expertise in whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Consensus?
Consensus?
No, it had had ocracy in the end. I forgot what it's called though.
Yeah, I don't know specifically the term, but yeah. I mean the idea that these are the people who know the most in the field, and they're of the highest caliber with regard to the education on the subject matter and things, and just going with one person's view on that is not an acceptable thing. But when you have consensus, when there's agreement among the most educated and knowledgeable people, that's
that is a valid appeal to the authority.
Right.
That is not fallacious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they want to compare or trying to say it's as if it's an ad populum, like just this is the popular opinion or something, that's a completely irrelevant and invalid argumentation form. But appeal to authority if it's a legitimate authority on the subject matter, and even better if it's a consensus view, then that's definitely a legitimate appeal and backing for, just like, and I repeatedly make this analogy is, well, the reason that we accept the idea that cigarette smoking is linked, causally linked to things like cancer and emphysema and things, is because that's this consensus view of the medical sciences. You can find an odd random person with a medical background or science background who might say that it's not, but you're not going to take that person's word or opinion, even if they have a degree behind their name or initials back there. And it's because the consensus view says this. It's the same with evolution. It's the same with all of these things.
Well, you do accept a fringe opinion if if the last part of your name ends in illbox or free or logos. Those guys.
Or Hall.
Yeah, or Hall. Oh, those guys take fringe to like a whole new level. I mean, but if you're a guy like Arcane, oh, and by the way, I've gone 2 hours. It's quite overdue. Fuck Arcane logos. Okay. He's a guy that is everyone's opinion is just arbitrary. It doesn't matter what anyone's education is. I've heard him go way deep down that rabbit hole where no matter it really doesn't matter what an expert or a consensus says, because he did research and he came up with a different conclusion.
Good for him.
Which is just a shocking. It's something that just shocks me in a way. I shouldn't be shocked, but I just not shocked
every time. Huh?
Yeah, I just go I don't know. I just go, how could someone be this retarded? You know what I mean? Like it seems you don't ever go and do that with anybody else. You know what I mean? Like you don't go to a mechanic and then say, hey, what's wrong with my car? And the mechanic tells you, and then you go, all right, I'm gonna go to a dentist and have him. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it depends on who the dentist is. If his last name starts with Jadlow.
That's true. You know what I mean? Like why would you do? You don't do that. It's that old adage to me where you accept science and you accept all these other things in every other aspect of your 99% of your life. In fact, stuff you don't even realize, but the parts that conflict with your ideology, you rail against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people like Arcane, they don't seem to realize the idea what the consensus view means. I mean, in any case, everyone wants to take the opinion of the experts in any matter, history or science, or for some reason. He just goes to some wacky side where we reach that pyramid shoots lasers or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
It is just crazy. I mean, the consensus is way to go.
Yeah.
It is it is an inductive argument. If experts say that X is true, then it is most likely true.
Yeah, well, and that just goes to show you how when you deviate from that path, that you're pretty much open to accepting any kind of crazy thing, like that the pyramids were built by aliens with lasers and whatever. I mean, that's the kind of rubbish and whacked out stuff that you have to avail yourself to at least consider the possibility of it. Because
he literally said that pyramids shoot some kind of lasers or something.
Yeah.
That's why they won the battle.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, actually, though.
Hey, if anybody's seen the end of the last X-Men movie, we all know the pyramids were built by a mutant. So.
Oh yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Mutant.
Damn you, spoilers.
Spoiler to our history.
I just, they don't understand that when you. Well, he's a presuppositionalist of the worst kind. So, I mean, they never get out of their own little bubble anyway. But the point of you can posit any ridiculous explanation, is lost on them.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's only so many times you can talk to Arcane, and like he has the one thing that cracks me up about Arcane, other than that when he actually shows his face, he wears his hat slightly to the side, which makes him look like a douchebag. But you can always tell Arcane is bullshit is coming when he goes, you'll finish your point, and you'll go, okay, go ahead, and he clears his throat, and it annoys the fuck out of me. He goes, okay, man. So
yeah, I know what you mean.
I just like, oh, here comes bullshit. That guy. I don't know. Well, anyway, we're coming up on a little over 2 hours. I'm feeling this is a good place to stop. How you guys feeling?
I think so.
I think it's a good place.
Awesome. Okay, well, for everyone that didn't watch, go to my channel and watch immediately.
Even if they've made it this far, they've watched. So now
you must watch till the
preaching
end.
to the choir, so to speak.
Yeah, we should all get hats and write shit on it, like G-Man.
Yeah.
Oh.
Who I for one should ban. I think we should ban G-Man from writing anything until he can prove he has a high school diploma, because he is one uneducated motherfucker. I mean, tell me no one has thought of that in their heads at least half a dozen times.
Yeah.
Back when I've never had any interactions with G-Man, but I would immediately question. I mean, not that I want to poison the well or anything, but I would be curious to know what his education level is. Because apparently he didn't pass 9th grade English. I know that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah. So that's 30 seconds on G-Man we didn't need. All right, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
Gabby, later, Turtle. Nice having you aboard. Hope you can join us. It was nice having a 5th person, so I hope you stop by more.
Thanks for having me.
Potato, always a pleasure, of course. Whenever you're not driving across country.
Thank you.
And we'll see y'all next time. Talk to you later.
Bye.